Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the One Leeds Fan Channel with myself, Connor McGilligan, and I'm absolutely delighted. It's not just myself, Nancy, which is great, just me in a room talking to a camera. I've already partially introduced her there. We are joined by the fantastic Nancy Froston, the brand new Leeds United writer, obviously taking over from Phil Hay at The Athletic. And Nancy, we're just speaking off air there, and I just have to say, quite simply, welcome to the asylum. Are you prepared?
I think I am. I don't know. Phil gave me the kind of nicest possible handover as he could, and it was like, enjoy this, but also
Yeah,
it will be mental. So no, he gave a really good handover, and yeah, it's been good. I had a bit of a lead-in period, sort of working with him from January, February time. So I'm getting there. I think I know the little quirks and all the mannerisms that Leeds fans want to see from their reporter and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
yeah. And the beauty is, you've kind of already seen a sort of partial meltdown as well when it comes to the fan base. So that's quite a good way in for you there, Nancy.
Yeah, I know that sort of tailing off at the end of the season, and then obviously the playoffs. Like, well, we should just not talk about it. It's too much, but but yeah, it was quite interesting. Even through that though, I don't know, but obviously like Leeds fans have been through a lot worse, so it wasn't
Yeah.
as toxic as I was like fearing it could get. So I mean, there was still reasons to be positive, and like there was still every chance of going up and everything. But no, it's all good. Yeah, it was. We've gone through that, and I've said to Phil, getting promoted this season, Champions League within three, this is going to happen. Like I'm putting the curse, like it's the Hay curse that made all these years so rough for Leeds fans.
So you're like our new beacon of hope, really, aren't you? Now Phil's gone, and we've just been in the mud, and it's been dour for 2 decades. Your prosperity in a journalist, really.
We hope. Yeah, I've said this now, and God, someone will have clipped this up, and they'll be bringing it back out again at the end of April if something dreadful's happened. So, but
That's
yeah.
it. That's it. So I guess Nancy, just to give people a bit of background, really. I mean, the initial question is, I guess, why Leeds? Why Leeds United?
Why Leeds? Yeah, well, it's an easy question to answer, really. Apart from anything else, like what a job, what a chance to like take on a really exciting club, really exciting prospect. Controversially, like I quite enjoy the championship, so like I know we don't want to linger here, but
No, go on, please linger.
but 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 yeah, I love the championship. I was the EFL writer for a couple of years at the Athletic. I don't live too far away as well, which always helps. So I'll be up and down the motorway to Ellen Road every other weekend, or well, it's more than that, isn't it, with the championship?
Yeah.
Um, but no, I love the stories you get coming out of the championship, and genuinely, it's a really exciting time to come onto a beat of a big club. Not just like a big club kind of languishing. This is a big club with big ambitions again, and I believe really exciting owners with the best interests of the club at heart. And there's a lot to really be excited about. And I felt that as soon as I was kind of eased onto the patch doing it part time with Phil. And yeah, that was the perfect taster. So I was a bit hooked after that.
Yeah, we're just speaking off there as well about I'd messaged Nancy when I was a budding broadcast journalist for just a bit of advice, and she was extremely kind. And I was looking through the messages, and yeah, there was a bit of a Sheffield link there. We're just saying that was a nice little connection to get into the live stream. I felt there, Nancy.
Yeah, that's it. I was covering Sheffield Wednesday at the time, so Leeds fans will have to forgive me. I don't know if that
Yeah,
puts
yeah.
them off at all, but yeah. So that was an experience covering Wednesday for 3 years, and they're another big club.
Mm.
So yeah, and then a bit of a spell in between, and here we are.
Yeah, I
Both
feel,
on
I feel
Leeds.
I feel as well, Nancy, the Sheffield Wednesday, in a strange sort of way, you probably get journalists. I think Graham came from it was Chesterfield to Leeds, I believe it was,
Yeah.
but at least with the background of having a club with the size of Sheffield Wednesday, the transition might not be as sort of great for you, I guess. It's a similar vibe, similar team in Yorkshire in terms of size and grandeur. It might be okay. It might be the perfect sort of like transition club.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Like I think, luckily having that grounding, like it's given me a bit of a sense of what the expectations of, you know, these big clubs that have had a pretty rubbish time for a while. If we disregard like the Bielsa years for Leeds, like prior
Yeah.
to that, it gives you a good sense of like what the expectation is and like that desperation basically to go up. And obviously Leeds managed it, and I think maybe that was the difference in tone as well to like the end of last season, where um like as I was speaking to people who are around for the Bielsa time, like they were saying that was desperate, whereas like
Mm.
this year, I suppose, because you have been in the Premier League so recently, it wasn't maybe that desperate, but like everyone wants to go up, but it's not like, yeah, it's a different vibe. But no, and it was a really good way for me to like get used to Yorkshire folk and understand what it is for people different part of Yorkshire. I know, and I know that matters massively. But yeah, it's because I'm not originally from around here. It's kind of a good a good lesson in people who call a spade and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people can't sort of distinguish the accent difference from people from Leeds and Sheffield, especially
Oh, really?
people from outside the area. But my partner's from Manchester, and she can't tell the difference. We've got a friend who's from Sheffield, and I'm like, you can't tell the difference between me saying right and them saying rate good.
Yes.
There's a big difference there.
Yeah, no, I think I can, yeah, because I sort of lived in Sheffield for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and yeah, I reckon I've got that. I mean, I live in Derbyshire, so I've got that sort of variation as well between like how that changes down into here, which is weird as anything. But before I lived up here, yeah, I probably wouldn't have had any concept, but now I'm tuning my ear. It's getting there.
Yeah, it's a variety of accent changes, definitely. Even in my family, it's the Leeds and York accents are very different. But um, let's get on to. I mean, do you know what, Nancy? You've taken one of my points here. I literally put down taking Leeds into Europe. Nancy Froston. There we go. So we've already ticked that one off. But I guess with Nancy, we've got to really quickly and briefly touch on England from last night, and it's because I have a segue into there's just seems to be more focus on Marcelo Bielsa at the minute for Uruguay and the superb football they're playing at this moment in time. But England, Nancy, my goodness, how do we pick that apart?
Well, regrettably, I watched it, and it's an hour and a half of my life I won't get back.
Oh,
But yeah, it's not inspiring. Like, it must be hard for the players, to be fair, like because they've done what they set out to do and all those things. But you kind of you want to be impressed, don't you, across the group stage, and you want to believe, given the talent and everything, that England are going to kind of breeze through to at least the semis. But
yeah.
yeah, there was just nothing to get excited about. I think it felt very flat, and I saw some stats this morning about like there were fewer shots on target than the Algeria game from like the 2010 World Cup,
Oh,
which really felt like the dregs of being an England fan. That was like the biggest low. So yeah, it's the balance. I think it just isn't quite there yet, and I don't know. You can argue if they went on and won it from now, we'll probably never talk about it again, and it won't matter. But um, yeah, you kind of want to see more. And I know it's some people won't appreciate the comparison, but thinking back to like the women's team that won it a couple of summers ago, um, it's a different kettle of fish. But just the way that felt, every game felt like you were on the crest of a wave, and England
mm,
were playing so well and just blowing teams apart. And if they're to win a tournament, like I want the men's team to be able to do that as well, just because it helped that it was a home tournament, but just being in that where every game you just felt so good and so proud of the team. Like we've probably had it too good for a few years with the men's team, and maybe this is the one to bring us back down to earth again. But
yeah,
yeah.
which is crazy when you look at that team, isn't it? And I think there's the Leeds link there as well when Southgate came out and said, we just can't replace a Calvin Phillips type. And it's like, well, Gareth, if you think that, bring a Calvin Phillips type then, or bring him.
I know this is it. In the absence of much kind of Leeds connection or like obvious Leeds presence in the team, I can see why people are looking at Copa America and latching
Yeah.
onto Uruguay. So
Yeah, I've got I've
yeah.
I've got I've got a few friends who are it's a shame really, Nancy, that you were. I mean, you could probably definitely see it from the outside, especially at that point. You might have been covering Sheffield Wednesday, but 'cause I think that's actually when I was at university. But embroiled in those years under Marcelo Bielsa, where it was just complete chaos. And you mentioned previously, interestingly enough, about this season almost been obviously I'm paraphrasing, but this season being almost like not having that just sort of like hellfire and fury when it came to Leeds United under Bielsa and that anxiety. And it was true. And it was, I was looking at a bit of my content over that period not long ago, and just the sheer just panic and desperation for us to get up with this man so we can continue this great ride is
Yeah.
definitely, it's a different feeling right now at Leeds United. Have you sort of picked up on that vibe already?
I think so, yeah. It's that kind of and I've been watching the Take Me Home documentary to like get
Okay, yeah.
myself up to speed as well.
Yeah.
But even in that, I think am I right? It's kind of like a fear as well that you'd lose him, if he didn't go up again in that second season. Like it was as much driven by fear as it was desperation and sort
Yeah.
of, yeah, hope and dreams and all those things. So um it did feel different last year. I don't know if it's Daniel Farke's a very cool character as well, so maybe he sets the tone a bit, and obviously he's done it before and all those things. But yeah, I mean that season was mental, and I was covering Wednesday at the time and kind of looking enviously at kind of the journey that Phil and others were going on with Leeds after a pretty torrid time.
Mhm, mhm.
And yeah, just watching it from afar was was mental. So being part of it, I mean, I can completely understand why Leeds fans sort of revere Bielsa as much as they do, because they're the sort of characters that come around once in a generation, if
Yeah.
that, at your club. And he's a character kind of bigger than most clubs will ever get as well. So it's yeah, it's wild. That story is still going to be like one of the best stories of any Leeds fan supporting life, I imagine, for a while.
Yeah, it did feel like that, Nancy. It almost felt, as I say, from an outside perspective, obviously it's interesting to get your take at that moment in time, but it felt almost like Bielsa was also bigger than Leeds United, which I don't think you get often with
Yeah,
managers. So I think that was probably the difference.
yeah, definitely. I think you need a big character to take on these jobs at some of these big clubs. And you need the right type of big character as well. But yeah, he's so much more, isn't he? And I know all those coaches like Pochettino and Guardiola and others basically say they're like his disciples and stuff like that. And this
Yeah,
is just not language you get about like many other people. Like Cruyff is probably the other one.
yeah.
But a lot of these people basically like aren't still alive either. So it's kind of for him to still be there, perched on the edge of his little bucket or whatever for Uruguay is good fun and nice to still see him doing well.
So I guess you just touched a little bit on last season, Nancy. Well, obviously you said you kind of you were looking at Leeds from January, February onwards, really. What did you make of it? Would you see last season as almost like a pathway to success with Daniel Farke, or is it sort of the first season he didn't really get the full preseason, signings came in a little bit late? Were you sort of viewing it and maybe seeing it from, look, it's good getting to 90 points, we got to a playoff final, didn't quite work out for us? Or are you sort of looking at it and thinking, oh, with that squad, you probably had to go up?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because like before the start of the season, this time last year, I did like a predictions piece, and at the time, I think because Leeds were in such a state of transition and chaos is the wrong word because it was a lot of positive change, but objectively, it was quite chaotic to have so many players being turned over and Daniel coming in. I think like 3 days into pre-season, and the 49ers not announced until a bit after that. I didn't put Leeds down for promotion at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Then when I came in and I think I joined like the coverage in the middle of the unbeaten run, and I was like, right, well, I'm going to look a tool here because they're clearly going to do it. And then, and then it tailed off. I think we had about 10 games or something, and then it tailed off. And so I think, look, if you, I did a piece about how they're approaching this preseason as well last week. But if you think about all of that kind of positive but fairly turmoil kind of situation, for him to have turned that into the season they had against some teams where Ipswich was just on a mad one. Like, I mean,
Good way of
who?
describing it, actually. Ipswich were a
Yeah,
mad one.
constantly, weren't they? All those late goals. The amount of times I was sat in the press room at Ellen Road and everyone was like, "Of course they've scored a
Yeah,
94th minute winner or whatever." Um, everyone was always going to talk about Leicester and Southampton with Leeds in that promotion picture. I just don't think we'll see a season like that this year. And so actually, it's quite a healthy foundation. Um, to build into this season, assuming there aren't too many major losses, or they're able to recruit well for anywhere where they do have to make sales. It's a really sort of steady
Mm.
starting point. Obviously, it's not ideal not to go up because of various bits and pieces like PSR, and you're trying to convince some players maybe that they want another go at the Championship. But there's every reason, I think, to sort of set automatic promotion as the expectation now this season, and like, not to immediately put pressure on on them, but
You've done it now, Nancy.
I've done it now. But genuinely, if you got to the end of the season and they hadn't gone up again as well, you could probably see a world in which that's the amount of time they'd give Daniel Farker, and
Yeah.
then they'd give it to someone else. So, there is a degree of that pressure cranking up this year, which maybe there wasn't based on kind of what happened last summer.
Again, 100% agree, and I think it's when you take a step back, isn't it, as a fan base, and maybe look at the process. It kind of feels like it's a buzzword at this moment in time, but the process is probably leads into a second season, doesn't it, with Mr. Farker? But the Red Bull investment, Nancy, obviously
Yeah.
came out of nowhere, really. Like that, the 49ers seem to operate in relative silence, as we all know. But I have to ask you just about it. Obviously, there was a mixed reaction, as we know. It's a few clubs where they've, Salzburg being the major one, really, where they took over and sort of erased all of the history. Leipzig, there's an argument that they made Leipzig from where they were.
Mm.
No majority pathway from what we understand. Are you seeing this as a positive deal? Can you sort of bring us up as a fan base when it comes to Red Bull? Obviously, the most the best deal in EFL history as well.
Yeah. Look, in its current form, I'm
Yeah.
inclined to see it as a positive for sure. I wrote about this, spoke to a few people in Austria, a few people in Germany, and obviously, what they did to the clubs there. I mean, one, I don't think they'd get away with it in English football necessarily, but two, that's going to sort of hang over them forever as long as they've made a great success of both those clubs, and that's something that I would see as a positive for Leeds. Like, they can really draw on that experience. They've got like these crazy facilities and networks where the Red Bull athletes can go and train, and they can share all that knowledge, and tapping into that in some capacity is great. That is only going to make Leeds better, and kind of help Leeds. And I think the communication from the 49ers has been as clear and as good as you can have hoped on this. Like, the chairman coming out and saying they're not getting a seat on the board, the name's not changing, and everything, whilst we're in charge, is perfect. That's exactly what every fan wanted to hear, basically. I suppose that caution and that worry for Leeds fans is always going to be there, basically, if the 49ers ever decided to sell.
Mm.
Like, does it open the door, or whatever? But all you can do is take them at their word in the current moment, and the injection of cash will be great. The fact that it's a global brand showing, serious investment and interest in Leeds. I mean, it tells you something about, obviously, the size of the club and the reach of the club. And they wouldn't invest in Leeds if they thought that they were going to still be a Championship team in 5 years' time. So um, I think as well, it's important to say, like, yes, keep your reservations. Like, always be alert to these things as a fan when a company like Red Bull gets involved. But I think, from what I understand, like, Red Bull themselves are sort of transitioning into a slightly new era, with is it Dietrich Mateschitz, who was the
Yeah,
main
yeah, yeah.
guy, passed away a couple of years ago, and his son's now taken sort of control of their 50% of the company. And normally Red Bull go absolutely all in. They don't sort of do a minority stake. It's everything or nothing kind of thing. But they have in this instance, and it either shows that they're that willing to be on board with the Leeds sort of entity, that they're willing to change the way they do things, or it sort of shows just a bit of a new direction, basically. And it'll be quite interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, I'm inclined to see it as a positive at the moment, and as time passes, we can be the judges of that as it happens. But um, I was quite impressed with just the clarity as well from the 49ers on this.
I think from a PR perspective, when it comes to Red Bull, there has to be some clarity, doesn't there, with their recent history and investment and building and taking down of clubs. I thought that was quite good of Parag to do that personally.
Mm.
But in terms of the structure at Leeds United when it comes to Red Bull, then, Nancy, is this primarily an investment this season that we're probably going to see, be impacting on the pitch, maybe keeping hold of certain personnel of which we maybe thought that they were going to leave this summer? Or is it just, are we sort of just looking at maybe sort of majority infrastructure, etc., things just being developed around their investment?
I think you can definitely sort of put the investment down as a positive towards PSR, in terms of it
Mm.
probably helps in, not going to have to make as many sales. I don't think we really know exactly what that number is either, in terms of how close they are to the gap, and it'll all depend on, wages and loans and sales and stuff. But it will undoubtedly help with that. I think they're going to have quite an obvious presence in terms of, being on the front of the shirt, around the advertising hoardings. I would be surprised if there's not Red Bull bottles, well, probably for sale, or by the side of the pitch, if nothing else.
I've started subconsciously drinking it, which has been a bit weird, probably poor for my health, but there we go.
No, I see it, and I know another Leeds fan who I do football with at the Sunday League, and like he said, his son basically was in a shop the other day and was like, "Oh, can I get some Red Bull because they're
Oh
sponsoring
god.
Leeds?" So, but this is why people want to,
Yeah.
get involved with Leeds. So there's that buy-in from a huge fan base. So yeah, I think I don't know. Kind of, we don't obviously know. It's not out there kind of how much that's worth. We'll probably see when the accounts come out eventually for this year. But I think it would, yeah, it will make a difference in terms of PSR. It's a good move in that respect.
Mhm. I guess we have to be. Oh, this is going to be a fantastic period for you, Nancy, when it comes to the transfers. What's going on, Nancy? I wonder what the sort of buzzword is going to be when it comes to yourself, or buzzwords. But it was, is anything happening, Phil, or something like that, something
Yeah.
of that regard. But the calm before the storm, it feels right now. But I feel that there are maybe some Leeds fans worrying at this moment in time that we haven't made signings, instantaneously. Obviously, the window's been open for a bit now. Is this just the period of time where the Euros is going on, Nancy, where it almost makes things a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, look, I get it as well, because it's the first thing you want as soon as the season's finished. If you've not had a good outcome that you wanted, even if you have, to be fair, if you have
Mm,
got promoted, you just want to know what it's like, the shiny new thing, isn't it? Like collecting stickers or something. But no, it is a quiet period, genuinely. I don't see that when I put my journalist hat on. I don't see that as anything to worry about or a reason to panic, mainly because I think what we've seen from Leeds under the 49ers is just quite a lot of sensible management. Like, they're not going to go out and drop 40 million on a player or two players without first making sure, I think, that they've got the room for that in the PSR budget or whatever allowance, and that they've kind of, yeah, got that with some sales
mm,
first. And I think they know what they need to do, and they're working hard on that. Um, in terms of outgoings and tidying up, like with those loan players that went out last summer, and you'd expect most of them to go back out again, or try and get some money and move them on permanently. So I can understand the clamour, and I know it's always that way for Leeds fans, but particularly in the context of this window and what Leeds need to do. As long as they don't get to deadline day and that we suddenly descend into some sort of panic buying, I don't think it will come to that anyway. To be honest, I don't think it's a bad thing to just tidy up, get things sorted, kind of with the players they actually already have
mm.
under their in their possession or whatever, and then go to the market and work on stuff. And it's never sort of that linear either. It's not like we've done this, now we'll do this. They will, obviously, there'll be crossover, and they'll know who they're probably after and all these things already. But a lot of it will depend on who goes as well. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of moving parts.
Busy one for you, definitely. I guess the big one, as you've probably been peppered with already, Nancy, is Joe Rodon. Now we've just been speaking about the Euros earlier on. Max Verber's out there playing with that fantastic Austria side, by the way. Obviously scored an own goal on his first game against France, but he was playing yesterday and played relatively well. I guess when it comes to Joe Rodon, if Max Verber was to maybe stay around? I know he's not wanting to discuss his future till after the Euros, but is that probably one who you'd still expect to leave? There's surely got to be maybe more interest than maybe even just Borussia Mönchengladbach.
Yeah, I think, and the same probably applies to all of those that went out last year. I mean, you wouldn't have put much money on Brendan Aronson coming back and sticking around, would you? So I suppose that shows the doors open, and that shows the difference of maybe them coming in, having a chat with Daniel Farke and really kind of getting a sense of what his project is. Because when I looked at the dates for last season, although I understand like he was kind of involved a bit in discussions about outgoings before he was formally announced, like I don't think he'd have had the influence or the say that he does now.
Yeah.
And they all went out within the first week after he was appointed. So, and if they choose to do that based on the clauses they had, etc., his say might not have really mattered much then at the time. So, yes, I probably would still expect someone like Verber to go out. And then in the context of Joe Rodon and whether that means he comes back, the problem is when you have a player on loan and he plays so well. And
We've had it before, Nancy, with Ben White.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? And he's probably not got. I'm probably not speaking out of turn to say not got like a massive shout of starting for Spurs anytime soon and all those things. Like, there's going to be a lot of interest from Premier League teams, mid to bottom half, and they're going to have that money for just the pleasure of being in the Premier League. So I think I saw something about Southampton and a swap deal for Charlie Alcaraz, and the potential for that there. So let's see. I know Leeds, retain that interest basically in bringing him back, and the same for Connor Roberts, but it depends what happens with the manager at Burnley, and there's all those things there. So they might have a bit of a bum fight if they're to get in the mix for Rodon, but I'm sure it'd be a popular one if they do manage to get him back, either loan or permanent.
Yeah, you're 100% right there, definitely with the fan feeling. Is there a pressure to be selling these? We've spoken about the assets before, and Leeds are quite lucky in that respect, aren't they, Nancy, when we're trying to comply with these rules that we have Nonto, Archie, Somerville, and probably a few more in that side, really, where you can make some nice profit. Are we sort of needing to do that within a certain time restraint at Leeds United, or is that a little bit fabricated?
The PSR deadline is the end of the month, so I guess it just depends on kind of the nuances of like when the paperwork's signed versus when it's announced and all those things. I think there is obviously that pressure maybe to move on, one or two, or I guess you never want to be paying loads of wages for players that either aren't or sort of on the fringes of the squad, or they aren't a key part of the plans. So yeah, I mean, I can see the trouble is when you've had those loan players going out and coming back as well, is that they might be wanted based on what they've done, but some of them maybe aren't as kind of in demand, and that's that's fine. But you're then never going to maybe get what you paid for them or all those things. But I think, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you probably see at least one high profile departure, and based on PSR and what matters and all those things. It'll go into the next accounting year if it's not by the end of this month, or the next sort of PSR year. And there's obviously not many days left, but I think someone like Somerville, based on the lowish fee that Leeds paid for him versus kind of how replaceable he might be, and the emotional attachment, like the emotional attachment's far higher for someone like Archie Gray, isn't it? So if you pointed a gun to most Leeds fans' head and said choose someone to sell, I don't know, it'd be probably Nonto or Somerville, I'm going to guess. But
I guess so. Yeah.
I can't imagine many fans are going, absolutely, we should sell Archie Gray. So I think there'd be rioting if he's if he goes. But it's going to be tough, isn't it? It's horrible to lose any of your best players, but Leeds they've built a young squad with lots of talent that have performed well despite being relatively kind of inexperienced. And I know Daniel Farke mentioned that a lot of times last season about we're a young squad, and he's not wrong. So, but then that means that people want them. So
Yeah, and then he also wanted experience, didn't he? He was mentioning that towards the back end. I think he mentioned Luongo, didn't he, and Sam Morsey at Ipswich being sort of players who Leeds needed at that period. And he was probably right in terms of experience. I guess we have to segue there, Nancy, but you did mention Archie Gray, and I think Bild reported it. I don't know if there's a yes or no here, or if it is just agent talk. But there was a lot of discourse about maybe Dortmund being interested, and Archie being sort of like having, and once again I'm paraphrasing, but sort of like raising an eye at Dortmund. I guess Dortmund are an eyebrow, I should say, but Dortmund are one of those teams where you look at and think, I saw a few of the other rumours. I saw City, I saw Arsenal and Man United and all this sort of stuff. Man United would be crippling, but you look at Dortmund and you think there's a really nice pathway there for young lads, and obviously the most recent one being Jude Bellingham. I mean, is there any truth in that? And on the back of that, do you think that would be a one that Archie as an individual probably would struggle to turn down with that pathway?
yeah, that's the one to strike fear in your in your
Yeah,
heart as a Leeds fan, isn't it?
yeah,
With like, it tells you something maybe about the way that young players are coming through, that they don't immediately hear that Man City or Man United are interested, and like that's the way that they're going to go. What I understand at the moment is that, like, I guess they're waiting to see what gets serious. They're listening to things.
mhm,
Um, Obviously, like, you never know if it got far down the line, and I believe that Dortmund are one of those clubs basically that are in the mix. His talent is basically such that we are talking in those terms, as in Big Six clubs and um, you know European, well, Champions League finalists. So
giants.
giants. I think we can call them giants. Yeah. I don't see a world in which a mid-table club comes in and gets him. We're talking in bigger terms here based on his talent. Um, so yeah, as I understand it, they're there, they're in the mix. I think they've probably expressed an interest, but you kind of get to a point where until something's concrete and they go to Leeds and say, look, this is what we're willing to pay, or they go to the agent and say, come and look around the training ground and do that sales pitch, which obviously they did with Bellingham. I think Manchester United did with Bellingham as well. Um, you know, I think you're at a point where, and if you weren't a fan and you looked at this objectively, and your 17, 18-year-old brother was wanted by all these clubs, you would say, listen to what everyone's got to say and we'll make a decision after that. Like, I don't think it's,
Especially Dortmund.
yeah, especially Dortmund. I don't think he's wrong basically to hear from all these people that like him. So yeah, that would be the one that I would sort of be nervous about if I was a Leeds fan.
Yeah.
But just because you've seen the pathway, and it's so clear and it's so established now, and they seem to look after them really well and all those things, and yeah. But the emotional thing with Leeds, it counts for a lot as well. It goes both ways, I think, especially we're not just talking about Archie Gray, are we? We're talking about the Gray family, and it's more than just a young player who's come through the academy with him, which is it counts for a lot.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. There was obviously the huge attachment with Phillips, but I feel Phillips, for whatever reason, merged into Bielsa as well, so they became like one entity. Whereas, obviously, like you've just mentioned with Archie, there's his younger brother coming through the academy as well. There's Eddie, there's Andy. It's they've lived in Harrogate for the best part of like 70 million years. So as a family, it's very ingrained in Leeds United, isn't it? So I think that attachment is going to be painful when he leaves. I think we know now at some point he's going to leave. At some point he's destined for even greater things than Leeds United, I think. But Liam Miller has been discussed a few times. I guess, an update, Nancy, and would that, being the EFL guru that you are, do you think that would be a decent little acquisition for Leeds United if it were to happen?
Yeah. So I think we've got obviously quite a lot of connection to the States and to Canada. So one of my colleagues,
Yeah,
yeah,
somehow.
for better or worse as well, based on Leeds' recent history with
Yeah.
American and North American signings. So yeah, as we sort of understand it, there's interest there. I don't think it's me going out on a limb here to say that Leeds ought to be aware of his talents because he scored a pretty good goal, didn't he, for Preston against
Yeah.
against Leeds in one of the games last year. So, and he's coming off his best ever season individually. I think he's got a year to go on his contract with
Yeah.
Basel. So I think he'll be one that they're looking at. But if, for example, you don't sell Somerville or you don't sell Monto, you don't necessarily need to bring in a winger,
It's
or
true. Yeah.
So again, I think we're talking in those terms where it could depend on what happens with outgoings. But yeah, he's someone they're sort of aware of. Whether I think he fits that profile, doesn't he? Of sort of a young player, young enough player, with plenty of potential. I'd be interested to see what he does in a Leeds team versus a team that did well, but then had a few sort of rough parts of the season. Obviously, finished mid-table. I don't know kind of what sort of fee actually they'd be after, but you'd think with a year left on his
Mm.
contract, it would be colossal. But then whether clubs start adding on zeros because it's Leeds,
Yeah.
that's something I'm yet to learn. But I imagine that's a factor. Um, but look, I imagine he's the first name of many that is going to get thrown about as this window goes on. It's
Yeah.
quite an interesting one. I think he's an intriguing prospect for them, basically.
Do you think that it's funny you bring that up, Nancy? Do you think something like that would happen? Obviously, we see it with Man United, don't we, in the Premier League all the time when they go for players. You seem to get every club around Europe just putting like 4 zeros on the end of it. Do you think now they've maybe seen the Red Bull investment, they've seen how how big that is for Leeds United? Do you think that could happen within this sort of sphere that Leeds are working in?
Yeah, I think there's always that potential. Especially this goes for everywhere in the market. If they know, that you've sold a particular position and you're desperate to replace them, that always puts a bit of favour in the selling club's kind of hand.
Hmm.
But I would be stunned if Leeds over the years haven't got into negotiations and found that they're being asked for way more than they feel is fair value for the player just because a club's dealing with Leeds. Like this is what happens with the bigger clubs, and it's up to the club, whether they're willing to basically go along with that or whether the desperation sets in. The good thing I say for Leeds is I think you've got a really good kind of transfer sort of committee and really good advice from Nick Hammond, involved in the negotiations and stuff. So yeah, I don't think Leeds are like a panic buy, sort of paying over the odds club at this stage,
Mm.
at the moment under the current owners. But I bet it happens. I bet they
Yeah.
get in the room and they go, hang on, this is not close to what we've
Yeah.
discussed. It would not shock me at all.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, going back to Liam Miller as well, because I think there's a lot around Sheffield United. I think they were sort of the first club, weren't they, who were sort of interested in him. And I was saying, Nancy, to a friend of mine, it might be interesting to see how this dynamic works now with Leeds in the mix as well. Because obviously we are probably, I'd say we are the biggest club in the division, but with the 3 coming down, there's still, obviously they have those parachute payments. They're probably the 3 who are more likely to go straight back up based on statistics. So do you think, obviously in a hypothetical world, you wouldn't know this, but do you think someone like Liam Miller, in your opinion, would maybe look at Sheffield United as a sort of more attractive prospect for, because they've just come down? And do you maybe see that as a problem for Leeds going forward?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is the other thing to say. Obviously, clubs with parachute payments are one, going to have a bit more money to throw around, but two, probably find it harder negotiating for players that they want. I don't know. A lot of this, a lot of the way transfers work nowadays, it's not just does the player want, one club that might go for promotion versus another club that go for promotion. You quite often find that clubs practically pitch themselves to the players. They'll be talking about the project, or they'll get the manager in to really sort of sell the idea of where they're going to be used and how they're going to be used, and
Mm.
all these things. Sometimes it's really simple, and a player just wants to be nearer to, an hour closer to their family, or any of those things when it comes to commuting, um, and that's fine. I think the more time I've worked in football, you come to appreciate that's kind of healthy and normal, and they've got lives, and all those things matter to
No, they
them in the
haven't,
same
Nancy. The robot.
in the same way that it would matter to us, if you had to commute an extra hour. But if you're looking at, I don't think Sheffield United necessarily the most settled kind of off the
Mm.
pitch. I think we've seen that. Leeds have that in their favour. Whether it would ever come down to just choosing one or the other, again, it's all part of that pitching process, I guess, of proving that you're the right place for that player.
Yeah, and obviously being a Sheffield Wednesday and now a Leeds United writer, Nancy, we it's the era of caution on going to Sheffield United, of course. Um, have we heard any have we heard anything else as well, Nancy, when it comes to Gruev? I mean, that's gone quiet. That was a big thing as well. It felt like 3 weeks ago, almost instantaneously, Dortmund were in and they're about to make a bid, and Leeds were going to have to accept. I mean, it seems to have gone relatively quiet on that end, really.
Yeah, I've not heard anything fresh on that. Like, it
No.
seems to be quiet. I take that as a positive. I would hope that's a serious positive for Leeds, because
No news is good news and all that.
no news is good news. Yeah, like, we just don't. This is the other thing as well. Like, in different settings, no news like in a club takeover, I would take to be like serious, as in you don't want a potential owner running their mouth all over the place, and if it's all in the press, like, it's probably gonna not gonna happen. When it comes to transfers, though, like, no transfer basically in the modern era happens without some sort of update and noise at every stage. Like, I said this the other day, like, when Danny Ings went from Aston Villa to West Ham, everyone was like, "Oh my god!" Like, that came from nowhere, because
Yeah.
nobody had any part of it. But that's like one case that I can think of in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, where a transfer has just really randomly happened. So, or people have done well to keep it quiet. So yeah, I've taken no news as good news on that for now.
Yeah, 100%. I guess the interesting part of all this as well, Nancy, getting into this transfer window, of which I do feel sorry for you. Um, but it's the sort of expectancy of what these players are going to be going for, and obviously we can all speculate, but if it is like a Crysencio Somerville, we've seen reports saying that Leeds are, because of the Red Bull investment now, it's like Leeds would push for 40 million. I mean, Archie, 50 million, all this sort of stuff. It feels like, I don't know, maybe it's because we're championship level and you expect clubs to maybe fleece Leeds in a sense, naturally, with them being, in a higher division with, higher wage structure, et cetera, et cetera. It feels like that's going to be a thing. Are you expecting, like, if we are to sell one of these big assets, are they to go for a mass amount of money, or do you think we need to sort of reduce our expectations a bit when it comes to valuation?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that I think, £35 million fee has sort of attached itself to Crescencio Somerville.
Yeah,
I don't think that's founded on anything except from someone along the line has probably said, "Yeah, I reckon he's worth 35 million," and then that's
yeah.
the figure
Transfer
that's,
marked.
yeah, that's attached itself to him. So I don't know. Look, if I was Leeds and you're looking at any of those assets, I don't think you should be selling for anything less than probably 20.
Yeah.
And that's not just, me sort of trying to please the crowd here. It's like, if you look at some of the sales that, for example, Southampton made last summer, they got a lot of money
Mm,
for, players of either a similar age profile or probably less experience. Like, they had either 6 months to a year of kind of good Premier League football behind them. So you're selling potential, which is always, quite a good asset to have. But actually, for some of these players, you're selling a season of, good performances in the Championship behind them, which is, I would say, like, more of a stable foundation than like half a season of all right Premier, standing out in a struggling Premier League team. If you
yeah.
are the Championship player of the season, as Somerville is, um, yeah, you shouldn't be looking at anything less than that. But I think maybe when they get in the room and they talk, and if that's the best offer that they get, and it turns out to be 27 million instead of 45 or something, I mean, it's still a massive figure for a Championship club. Forwards always get a bit more as well, but it's hard. You can put those massive figures on the ones you don't really want to let go, like Archie Gray. Let's call it 50, let's call it
Yeah,
55. And at that point, if a club dropped 60 million on Archie Gray, you'd be like, okay, yeah,
yeah.
fine. You can do a lot with 60 million and it'd be pure profit with him or whatever. But that's just me plucking a number out of the air. That'll be
Yeah,
attached to him now.
yeah.
60 million
You've
pound
got
Archie Gray.
you've got to
Yeah.
do that now because you'll be the highest ranked news article. Nancy Froston says this. But once again, I do a show, Nancy, called The Rumour Mill, and it's just basic. It's pretty much ranking rumours and talking about them. But with regards to Nonto and Somerville in particular, is there any? I mean, we've seen Chelsea with Somerville, haven't we? We know Todd Bowley loves those wingers and racking up those prices for them. Obviously, ideally, Leeds would have a bidding war for a few of these players. But
Yeah.
has there been anything in particular on Nonto or Somerville? Or once again, is it quite? We know that it's fantastic with Crescencio because he doesn't seem to make any noise whatsoever. But are there any clubs that are sort of been increasingly linked or been a bit louder in the background?
Um, well, I saw obviously the one with Brighton took off with Somerville last week, and as far as I understand, that wasn't really based on anything. Like, I don't think that Brighton were seriously sort of considering putting an offer on the table or picking up the phone to Leeds. But yeah, I think those types of clubs are circling and considering. I don't know that any of them necessarily are at a stage where we're going to see it heat up immediately.
Mm.
But I think both of those players, basically, they're going to be ones that are talked about all summer. They are two of the more likely ones to go, I think, based on obviously the position that Leeds were in with Nonto last year, and and everything that happened with that. Like, it's not out of the realms of possibility that he's probably going to feel a bit unsettled again this year with the potential of another Championship year ahead of him. But yeah, I think it's fair to say, like, those big clubs that are looking, particularly Somerville, it will be based on something. It's not like just easy to connect Chelsea and Liverpool to him. There are reasons that he's looking at that they're looking at him. Sorry, but again, talking about, like, if clubs enter transfer negotiations, whack an extra zero on, it would suit Leeds to have a bidding war here for either of these two. And if Chelsea are in the mix, you would slap a couple of extra zeros on, wouldn't you? Because you
Yeah.
know that they'll probably pay it if it got down to deadline day and they were desperate. So I actually think, had the Brighton thing been more serious, as far as I know, that would have been the one that worried me more. If you're a Leeds fan that wants to see Somerville in at Ellen Road next season,
Mm.
that type of club I think is a better move for him than a Big Six team, just because, yeah, I just think he would be able to sort of grow more incrementally.
Yeah, and you obviously want to see those players do well, don't you? I know we had an attachment to Phillips, but there's still Leeds fans who talk about Phillips coming back and all this sort of stuff. The sentiment, Nancy, is a huge thing at this club. It's a massive thing at this club. So welcome. But yeah, it feels very much like, it would be great to keep these lads around, but it's a little bit unrealistic. I think many fans as well are expecting us to maybe replace like for like when it comes to quality and caliber. That doesn't feel like that's ever going to happen with a player like Crescencio or Somerville, does it, Nancy, with the talent at his disposal?
No, but then look, I mean, this last season was great for him,
Yeah.
but he was kind of a slow burn up to that point, wasn't he? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, he scored a couple in the Premier League the year before, didn't he? But like, I
It was more
don't
non
think,
it was more Nonto, wasn't it? He was the
yeah,
star
yeah.
guy there. Yeah.
So, this time last year, I can't imagine many Leeds fans were thinking, yeah, Somerville's going to rack up 20 goals and win Championship Player of the Year. Like, you probably wouldn't have gone that far with even the most optimistic kind of predictions. So, um, I don't think you're going to replace that straight away, because again, you'd have to fork out probably the price of whatever you're selling for. But you can get, you can either get an assortment of players that can contribute the same amount of goals to replace that within the side, or I think you can do it the way that Leeds have done it and pay something less for
Yeah.
a player with potential, nurture them, okay, maybe you might need a season or two before you see the returns. But that's kind of the model that a lot of clubs are going down, and not many have probably got it as right as Leeds have. With this group where you're looking at one of 4 or 5 who could be sold. I mean, and there's more than 5 that I would say that are probably saleable assets for Leeds, but there's 4 probably that are, realistically the ones that people are going to be in for this summer. So, yeah, like it'll be disappointing to lose someone like him. Farke will have to think of ways around it, but it shows that the way that Leeds are doing business works, and it speaks to a healthy operation of the club, basically.
Of course it does. Right, I'm going to absolutely take you away from transfers because I don't want to exhaust you this early on. Right, what are you more excited for? Portsmouth away or Boxing Day with Stoke City? At Stoke City? What are you sort of looking at with these fixtures, Nancy, and thinking, God, I can't wait to go there?
Oh, well, I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain, but the press food at Stoke is sensational.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I was at Stoke on Boxing Day a few years back when I was covering Sheffield Wednesday, and I got like an entire second Christmas dinner on Boxing Day. So from that basis, this is not helping for Leeds fans at all. I mean, it's not too far away as well. That's the main thing. You look at Boxing Day, and I always think like, I don't know, maybe it's different if you're going as a fan, but like it's nice if you can be home and have your third helping of the buffet or whatever
Yeah,
exactly. before bed. That's nice. But yeah, so that would be good. I think I'm quite looking forward to the games against Derby. Just for the tastiness of that, and they're both in December, so it's like a bit of a sandwich, at the start and end of December playing Derby.
And not far, and not a long trip for you either, which will be
not
good.
a long trip for me either, yeah. But just locally as well, like sad to report, but I do live in a Derby hotbed, so it would be quite interesting just to see the dynamic around that of hotbed of Derby fans around here. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Open day, I'm actually quite intrigued, for Portsmouth. I don't expect a club to do what Ipswich did again and sort of immediately breeze through the league, but they're quite an interesting side. They did really, really well last year.
Big club as well, aren't they? I know that doesn't mean anything, but yeah.
And there's a few places that I've never been as well, which I'm looking forward to doing with Leeds, like Sunderland, Middlesbrough. I've never been to Plymouth away, so final day of the season, I'll be down there to watch, someone lift the trophy. Cooper, hopefully, if he signs again, lift the trophy or someone. So yeah. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun season. Although I was writing them all in my calendar today, and I was like, I forgot just how many games there are. And I think once you factor in Carabao Cup, which I think gets announced tomorrow, the first draw, and then the FA Cup and various other bits and bobs, it's yeah, you get on the hamster wheel. But the Leeds fans are all on it with me because there's like 5,000 at every away game, so it's you're not in it on your own, which is good.
That's it. It feels like I was looking at them today, Nancy, and I'm a little bit like, I was like, well, is that the first 4 games, is that tough? And then I'm thinking to myself, well, it feels like in the Championship, it's never a month of which you think, that's I mean, obviously you pick up a few more points here and there, but it's just so unpredictable. I'm looking at it now and I'm like, well, I don't know, is that going to be an easy month or a hard month? I mean, the first month obviously is including Hull, isn't it? It's West Bromwich Albion. I think there's Sheffield Wednesday might be in there. Danny Roll, Sheffield Wednesday, and Portsmouth. I mean, that feels relatively tough. And you look at, he's maybe one as an outsider, isn't he, Nancy, in terms of Danny Roll and the job that he did last season of maybe Sheffield Wednesday having a good campaign this year if they get it right behind the scenes. So it feels like a relatively tricky start. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think so. Like I've been working out a ranking system to write an article on this for tomorrow, and as I've worked it out and sort of given each team a difficulty rating or whatever, I think Leeds had like the 7th or 8th hardest start. I think Portsmouth have got the toughest start by far. It doesn't always count for a lot, but it's fun to try and work out some sort of system. Yeah, I think I'm intrigued by Sheffield Wednesday this year. Holding on to Danny Roll was massive, I think, for them, and so to have done that is great. It just depends on what they can achieve in terms of signings or being settled off the field, like you say. So that'll be tough. I do think Portsmouth will take to the Championship quite well. I don't think they're going to massively struggle. And then West Brom. Leeds didn't beat West Brom last season. I don't think they were one of the teams. I think there was 3 teams. It was West Brom, Coventry, and there was another. Oh, Sunderland.
Sunderland, yeah.
Who I don't think they beat. They either drew or lost. So
Yeah.
that was a tough one. And I think Corberan was linked with Leicester, but obviously hasn't gone there. So that's good news for West Brom, assuming he doesn't go anywhere. And I would say that was kind of a tough start, but there's every chance to sort of lay down a real marker, because when you think back to last season, I think it took 3 games before Leeds won. I think they won the 4th.
Yeah.
And so that, that matters for the end of the season, because you might look back on that now and think, oh, okay, if Leeds had gone into the season firing, or if they hadn't lost against Blackburn or something at the end of the season, even the games you think are going to be easy, they all factor in.
Is the sort of, the teams coming down, you're looking at them and thinking, I mean, I can't profess to know if this is in any form of completion, or even if it's further down the line. But when I think Burnley were interested in Van Nistelrooy, obviously he's been part of the Dutch setup, hasn't he? And it seems very Burnley at the minute to go down that route. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the sort of picture now, Nancy, I don't really know who I'm looking at and thinking. I mean, obviously it's pre-transfer business as well, so there's so many variables. But I don't really know who I'm looking at right now, because the fixture have just come out, obviously, and thinking, I bet that that's top 2, that's top 3. I guess you're just looking at the obvious ones just because of, I don't know, last season.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I think off the top of my head, based on just vibes, I think Leeds. Everyone's going to put Leeds up there this year. I think Luton are going to be really strong, actually, coming down. I'm less certain about Burnley and Sheffield United, but I do think Luton will come back and they'll hit the ground running. I've tipped Middlesbrough to do well for like the last 2 seasons based on that crazy half-season surge they had. Yeah, Michael Carrick. And like Coventry are a team that I really admire. I just think I'm impressed. They signed Jack Rodoni the other day for not a whole lot of money. They do a lot of good business. Mark Robbins has done an amazing job there. So last season, I was convinced they were going to sneak into the playoffs and possibly do it, and they just missed out. So they're a team that just, like, as a neutral, I enjoy. As if you're playing them with your team, they sort of scare the life out of me, because they just don't give up. They play really well. So I'd like, assuming Leeds get over the line nice and early, nice and safe, I would be quite keen on seeing someone like Coventry go up. I think you're going to see something a bit more like the season before last, where obviously they were in the playoff final, Luton, and Millwall just missed out that year. I don't think necessarily Millwall will be in the mix this year, but I think there's more chance of like a few outsiders that are a bit different, which is fun, because no one wants to see, probably going to, annoy people here, but no one wants to see like West Brom Norwich playoff final, do they?
I feel everybody.
It's not as entertaining as
Nancy. I feel everybody wants to see a Derby Leeds playoff final as a neutral, and I'm really not signing up for that. No
one would ever win. Both teams have the worst playoff record. It would just go on for eternity until we all just expired in Wembley.
Yeah, that's it. It harking me back to that, that Frank Lampard Derby side, with Tomori, Mason Mount. They had a fair few loan signings there. Harry Wilson, another one. It feels like that's the way to really get at. I think it sounds so obvious, Nancy, doesn't it? But if you're able to get some real quality loan signings, not just 1, but 2, 3, potentially even 4, of real quality, and you're lucky, really, they hit the ground running, that seems like the best way, because then you can obviously make a decision on them, the year afterwards, if they can acclimatise to the Premier League, if that is indeed the place that you get to. But it does feel like that's the way out of the Championship, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Loans with options, like, for example, Southampton with Taylor Harwood-Bellis had a great season for them. Obviously, they had that option that as soon as they won, triggered. I can't imagine that he'll need to play much in the Premier League for them before he's being linked with, you know, a big move somewhere else, even though he's come from Man City. It's definitely like the type of business that works well. But then there's always the risk, and you'd be talking in those terms about Joe Rodon. I think this year, had Leeds gone up, I think they would have been able to stick a bit of money on the table and sign him. But
Yeah.
that's the risk, I suppose. And again, with like Ben White a few years back, you then, if you have a good season, then you don't get up. But it's risk and reward with loan players always. And if they help you get over the line, that's great. So I think those connections, like looking around some of the big six clubs as well, and they'll look at Leeds and have seen one, kind of the great setup that's there and the facilities and everything, but also two, like they can develop your asset for you, and either they'll buy them off you, or you're going to be able to flog them on for good PSR, for their own, the Premier League standard one for PSR. So yeah, it's the way forward, I think. There is always that potential that you're going to get stung, but it's worth the risk.
Is indeed, yeah. It feels like that blend is very much necessary to get promoted. Nancy, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. It's been an hour worth of really interesting discussion, and yeah, a few lovely insights there. We'd absolutely love to have you back on the channel, and I'm sure that can be something that we can accommodate a little bit later on. That'd be amazing. But if anybody doesn't know where to find you, Nancy, give them a little bit of a sales pitch here. There's 1,300 people here, Nancy, so they're all here to see you. So yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Nancy Froston on Twitter. I should change that to at not Phil Hay, and that would have been, a funnier handle to have going forward.
Phil Hay 2.0.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So yeah, at Nancy Froston on Twitter, and then if you just Google my name and The Athletic, like if you're keen, I mean, I share links all over my Twitter there, but that's the main place really to find me. But yeah, on The Athletic. So I think we've got a Euros sale on at the minute. We definitely did last week. So if you've ever been thinking about it, now is the time. Cash in on the Euros sale. But yeah, you'll find me there, or at Ellen Road once the season starts. I'll be there. I'll stick out the ginger girl wandering around. You'll be like, oh, there she is. So
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, it's been great to get you on, Nancy. But thank you so much. Go check out Nancy's Twitter. We'll put the link in the description below. Make sure you like the video as well, everybody. If you've enjoyed this with Nancy, it's been a full hour's worth. Can you believe it? But guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Nancy, thank you so much, and we will see you in a bit, guys. Cheers.